Hello everybody, my name is Josefine and today I'm going to talk about the possible formation of 7 PEth-homologues after the excessive use of an ethanol-based hand sanitizer. Participants who are enrolled in a abstinence control program are trying to improve by their absence of alcohol by the absence of ETG and UE. And they are warned about using products with hidden ethanol, such as in coughing syrup or alcohol-free beer. Moreover, they are asked not to consume any carbonated fruits or vegetables, and as Germans especially, we are asked to keep our distance from sauerkraut as well. Moreover, there's hidden ethanol in coating solvents as well as petrol. And in 2014, et al., they conducted a study where they found out that after the use of excessive ethanol-based hand sanitizer, there were positive results of ETG and UE. So this study aimed to find out if there's also a formation of PEth after the excessive use of ethanol-based hand sanitizer, because thanks to COVID-19, using an ethanol-based hand sanitizer became everyday business in everybody's lives. So the first question was, can a threshold of 20 nanogram per milliliter for PEth-16O18-1 be reached? And second of all, are other homologues formed following the repetitive use of an ethanol-based hand sanitizer? So here you can see the study design. I asked 10 volunteers, where 8 people were occasional drinkers, and we tested their PEth for 16O18-1, and it was below the threshold of 20 nanogram per milliliters. And we asked them to stay sober for another week just to make sure. And we also included 2 very regular drinkers, and they were allowed to drink 1 day up to the prior study. The study itself was that they had to use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer 30 times over 6 hours on 5 successive days. That means they had to use it every 12 minutes. Sampling was done by collecting DBS at the beginning and the end of every 6 hours on every single day. And on the very first day, initial urine, urine was collected as well before the 6 hours to determine their initial ETG concentration. And on every other day, urine was collected after 6 hours. We determined 7 different PEth. And ETG was measured by LC-MS as well. So for DBS collection, we cleaned the fingertip, punctured it with a single lancet. Afterwards, the first drop of blood was discarded, and we used a capillary who could hold up to 20 microliters to collect the blood. Then this was followed on the bottom 903 paper, and the drying took place for at least 3 hours at room temperature. After the dried blood spots were fully dried, they were punched and placed into a tube, where 1 milliliter of methanol was added, as well as the internal standard. Extraction took place for 1 hour by a vortex mixer at medium speed. Afterwards, the samples were centrifuged and 800 microliters of the supernatant were evaporated at 37 degrees under a gentle stream of nitrogen. The residue was then reconstituted in 100 microliter eluate and placed into the LC-MS tube. For urine samples, we did an aminoassay for ETG, and afterwards confirmatory analysis was carried out via LC-MS by a validated in-house method. The 7 PEth-homologues were validated in accordance with the guidelines of the German Society of Toxicological and Forensic Chemistry. There we tested for their selectivity, and linearity of calibration for PEth-16O18-1 was from 10 to 1,000 nanogram per milliliters. We also checked for accuracy and stability in the autosampler, which we passed, and the analytical limits were from 10 to 90 nanogram per milliliter for all homologues. Recovery and matrix effects were also in the acceptable range. Moreover, we took part in the property testing, which was only for 16O18-1, but since we passed we studied our method as well. Based on the initial concentration of ETG in PEth, the 10 volunteers could be divided into 3 groups. The first group consisted of 6 volunteers. Their initial ETG in urine was negative, and their PEth value was also negative in 16.081 and all the others. The second group, their initial concentration of ETG was also negative. However, they had a PEth 16.081 concentration from 10 to 20 nanogram per milliliter. And the third group consisted of the 2 very regular drinkers. They obviously had a positive ETG concentration, and their PEth value was above 210 nanogram per milliliters. So here you can see the results for group 1, the ETG in urine concentration after 6 hours of using ethanol-based hand sanitizer. In ETG in urine, there is a cutoff from 100 nanogram per milliliter, and on every single day, every volunteer exceeded this threshold. You might notice that on day 5, the gray bar is missing. That is because she got COVID and was excluded of the study. Here you can see the results of group 2. Their initial PEth concentration was from 10 to 20 nanogram per milliliter, as a reminder. And on the left hand side, you can see that the ETG in urine concentration after the use of an ethanol-based hand sanitizer for 6 hours was also exceeded. And the concentration of PEth 16.081 is stated on the right side. So the third volunteer is colored in blue, and dark blue is the PEth concentration prior to 6 hours, and light blue after 6 hours. She exceeded the threshold of 20 nanogram per milliliters twice on day 1 and day 3, always after the 6 hours. Another volunteer was number 4. She's colored in green. Again, dark green is for prior the 6 hours, and light green is after the 6 hours. She exceeded the threshold of 20 nanogram per milliliter 3 times, and on day 1 and day 5, she exceeded the threshold with more than 35 nanogram per milliliters. So we assumed that this was due to post-sampling formation in the red blood spots itself. Going over to the third group, volunteer number 2 had an initial ETG concentration on the very first day in the morning of over 3,000 nanogram per milliliter, and the other volunteer had an initial PEth ETG concentration of 500 nanogram per milliliter. During those 5 days, all the volunteers were asked not to consume any ethanolic beverages. So, of course, they failed every single day for their ETG concentration in urine and exceeded the threshold again. Both volunteers showed 6 of 7 homologues, and I'm only going to present you the 6 homologues of 1 volunteer. So here you can see the initial PEth concentration of 16.081 on the very first day was over 345 nanogram per milliliter. And over the course of 5 days, you can see that the concentration of PEth 16.081 slowly but steadily declines. And the PEth concentration after the 6 hours was always smaller than compared to the beginning. Moreover, the PEth 16.082 was detectable, and here you can see that again, over 5 days, the concentration declines. We also went for the PEth 16.024, which is known to be a very recent homologue, which is only built when very recent alcohol was consumed. We found out that in PEth 16.024, the fastest decline was detectable. So we started at 140 nanogram per milliliter and went down to about 65 nanogram per milliliter. Moreover, we detected the PEth-1606, 18081, 18181, as well as 18082, with the last one being the highest PEth-homologue, where she had concentration above 400 nanograms per milliliters. And compared to the other homologues, there was only a very slow decrease of concentration. To summarize all the gathered information, there was group 1 with initial negative results in both PEth and ETG, and there was no formation of any PEth-homologue observed. In group 2, where their initial PEth concentration was between 10 and 20 nanograms per milliliters, the threshold of 20 nanograms per milliliters was exceeded 5 times by both volunteers in total after the 6 hours during the whole study period. In group 3, 6 of 7 PEth-homologues showed a trend to lower concentration over 5 days, and no homologue increased their concentration. To conclude, the subject with PEth concentration slightly below 20 nanograms per milliliters are endangered of exceeding hitherto existing threshold using the ethanol-based hand sanitizer, and moreover, no new formation of homologues could be observed. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions?
Thanks. Dr. Jerome from Paris. What is the time between the application of
The last
solid or alcoholic on the end and the time you pick up the blood? What is the? You try different time.
They were asked to use the ethanol-based hand sanitizer. Do you mean like the very last time they used it for the sample collection, or?
Did you try different time between the applying of a hydroalcoholic solution and the sample? The time you take the sample. You try 5 minutes, part of an hour, 1 hour?
No, just like 5 to 10 minutes after the last ethanol-based hand sanitizer used. So very fast after the last one, we did the blood spot sampling.
Thank you, Josefine. Interesting presentation. Could you, do you know whether the cards were stored away from the alcohol? We know that, for instance, using the volumetric absorptive microsampling tips, if those are exposed to alcohol, they can actually absorb the alcohol, even if they haven't been in touch with blood yet.
Yeah, in our laboratory, we're not allowed to use any ethanol-based hand sanitizers, so we only did this with lab staff, and they had to always like go outside of the laboratory, use the ethanol-based hand sanitizer over there, and then come back inside and do their work or whatever. And so the ethanol-based hand sanitizer is like far away from the laboratory. So,
but I mean the cards as well. So
the cards are in the lab.
The possible near formation of PEth in the dry blood spots. You mentioned at some point. Well, why do you consider that as a possibility?
Sorry.
You mentioned that at some point the possible formation of PEth in the dry blood spots as a hypothesis why you could see elevated levels in one individual.
Oh yeah, because in the literature it is written when you like take the dry blood spot and there's a positive blood alcohol concentration, there might be formation afterwards during the drying process, and we didn't use any inhibitor, so and with a concentration of 35 nanograms per milliliter, and this volunteer was the only one who had such high concentration, so I just assume that it's due to post-sampling formation.